California sun gleamed off the polished luxury cars as Matt Damon pushed open the glass doors of Los Angeles's most exclusive Porsche dealership. Dressed in worn jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a $50 0-cents Timex watch, a gift from his father years ago, he looked nothing like the wealthy clientele who typically frequented this showroom. The salesman barely glanced his way as he approached a sapphire blue 911 Turbo S, running his fingers appreciatively along its sleek contours. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there with a purpose that would change lives, if only someone would take him seriously enough to listen. To continue hearing this incredible true story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and city in the comments below so I can include a special greeting for you in my next story. Matt checked his scratched Timex just past 2 p.m., plenty of time before picking up his daughter from piano lessons. The watch wasn't impressive, but it was priceless to him. His father had given it when he landed his first real acting role, saying, "No matter how much changes, remember who you are." Today, worth over $170 million, 0 cents, Matt still wore it nearly every day. The showroom gleamed with polished surfaces and spotless vehicles positioned under carefully designed lighting. A group of salespeople in identical charcoal suits clustered near reception, exchanging quick, dismissive glances before returning to their conversation. No one approached him. Matt wandered toward the 911 Turbo S, admiring its craftsmanship and mentally calculating how much it might raise in the charity auction he was planning, probably north of $250,000, 0 cents, with the right crowd and the right cause. From across the showroom, a tall salesman with slicked-back hair watched him. Even from a distance, Matt noticed the gleam of an expensive watch on his wrist, probably a Rolex. The man whispered something to his colleague and they both smirked. Matt had seen that look before, the judgment, the dismissal. He took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't about him. It was about the kids at Boston Children's Hospital, about the 8-year-old girl fighting leukemia with more courage than most adults he knew. With that thought firmly in mind, he continued examining the vehicle, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break around him. Blake Thompson had been the top salesman at this Porsche dealership for 5 consecutive years. At 38, he had perfected the art of identifying buyers from pretenders within seconds. His commission from selling just 2 top-tier models could exceed what most Americans earned in a year. His custom-tailored Tom Ford suit fit impeccably, and the Rolex Submariner on his wrist, a $14,000, 0 cents investment, sent exactly the right message. Success recognizes success. "Who's handling that one?" Blake asked Jeremy, a junior salesman. Jeremy glanced over. "No one yet. Greeter said he just walked in. Didn't even valet his car." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Honda Civic? Maybe a Camry if he's doing well?" "Tesla, actually," Jeremy replied, slightly surprised himself. "Older Model 3. Probably stretched himself thin buying that and now wants to pretend he can afford the next level." Blake straightened his tie. "Watch and learn, kid. Sometimes you have to save these guys from themselves." Blake approached with measured steps, his voice cultivated to hit that perfect note between friendly and professional. "Good afternoon, sir. Just browsing today?" Matt looked up. "Oh, hello. Actually, I'm interested in this model. It's impressive." Blake's practiced eye went immediately to Matt's wrist. The Timex confirmed his initial assessment. No one who could afford a $250,000 car wore a $50 watch. "It certainly is impressive," Blake agreed, his tone shifting to what his colleagues called his museum guide voice, used when showing something the viewer could admire but never possess. "The 911 Turbo S is one of our flagship models. 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds, 640 horsepower. The waiting list for custom orders is currently running about 9 months. The subtext was clear. This isn't for you." Matt nodded, apparently missing the implication. "The performance specs are amazing. How many do you typically have in inventory at any given time?" Blake's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. This guy was either delusional or playing some game. "Our inventory is quite limited for vehicles of this caliber. Blake explained coolly. "We primarily work with serious buyers on custom orders." He glanced pointedly at Matt's attire. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our pre-owned section? We have some excellent certified models that come with extended warranties." Matt's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, a quiet assessment. "I'm actually interested in potentially purchasing several new models," Matt said evenly. "For a charity auction." Blake didn't hide his skepticism. "Several? Of these?" He gestured to the $230,000 zero-cents vehicle. "And for a charity auction?" The last words were weighted with disbelief. With a smirk that conveyed decades of accumulated condescension, he glanced down at Matt's Timex and said loudly enough for nearby customers to hear, "Sir, perhaps you'd be more comfortable shopping somewhere that matches the," he paused deliberately, "timepiece you're sporting. Only saying this to save you some embarrassment." The showroom seemed to go quiet. A woman looking at a Cayenne SUV nearby audibly gasped. The receptionist froze, fingers hovering over her keyboard. And Matt Damon, though Blake had no idea who he was speaking to, simply raised an eyebrow and said nothing at all. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Several customers exchanged glances, some embarrassed, others quietly amused at what they perceived as someone being put in their place. Matt's expression remained remarkably composed. After decades in an industry built on ego and appearances, he had developed immunity to superficial judgments. "That's an interesting perspective," Matt finally said, his voice steady. "You believe you can determine someone's worth or purchasing power by their watch?" Blake misinterpreted the response as defensiveness. His confidence surged, convinced he was handling yet another dreamer who needed a reality check. "Look," Blake said, lowering his voice to what he considered a compassionate tone, though condescension dripped from every syllable. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I can spot the difference between someone who belongs in a Porsche showroom and someone who's just killing time." He gestured subtly toward Matt's attire. "No offense, but there's a certain caliber of client we typically serve." A few feet away, Nicole Chen, the dealership's newest hire, watched with growing horror. She recognized Matt Damon immediately. Her brother had made her watch Good Will Hunting at least 20 times growing up. Matt glanced down at his watch, the Timex his father had given him all those years ago. He ran his thumb over its scratched face, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "My father gave me this watch," he said quietly. "He wasn't a wealthy man, but he taught me that real value isn't about what you wear or what you own. It's about how you treat people." Blake's expression flickered briefly, a momentary recognition that perhaps he had miscalculated, but years of equating worth with wealth quickly overwhelmed that fleeting insight. "That's a lovely sentiment," Blake replied with artificial warmth, "and I'm sure it's a special keepsake, but this," he gestured around the showroom, "this is the real world, and in the real world, people who can afford Porsches don't wear Timex watches." A couple nearby turned to stare openly now, the woman whispering urgently while glancing repeatedly at Matt. Recognition was beginning to spread through the showroom like ripples in a pond. Matt took a deep breath. He had two choices: walk away or stay and see it through. Walking away would be easier, but something, perhaps the thought of the children who would benefit from the charity auction, made him stand his ground. "I came here today because I'm planning a charity event for Boston Children's Hospital," Matt said thoughtfully. "We're organizing an auction to raise funds for their pediatric cancer research program. I thought a few Porsches might make excellent auction items, the kind that could generate substantial bids from donors." Blake blinked rapidly, his certainty wavering. "A charity auction?" "Yes," Matt continued. "I was hoping to discuss acquiring several vehicles. This 911 Turbo S, perhaps a Taycan, and maybe a Classic if you have connections to source one. The auction is next month, and we're expecting to raise about $8 million for the hospital." Blake swallowed hard, a dawning suspicion that he might have catastrophically misread the situation beginning to take root. "And you are?" Blake asked, his voice no longer quite so assured. Before Matt could answer, a man examining a Panamera across the showroom exclaimed loudly, "Holy shit! That's Matt Damon! The showroom erupted in whispers and not-so-subtle pointing. Cell phones emerged from pockets and purses. Blake's face drained of color so rapidly that for a moment, Matt was genuinely concerned the man might faint. You're Matt Damon, Blake stammered, barely audible. Matt simply nodded, his expression neither angry nor triumphant, just patient, waiting to see what Blake would do next. David Merriweather, the dealership manager, emerged from his office like a torpedo. At 53, with salt and pepper hair, David had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when a situation in his showroom was about to go sideways. "Mr. Damon!" David exclaimed, his voice higher than his usual baritone. "What an absolute honor to have you visit our dealership today!" He extended his hand while simultaneously shooting Blake a look that clearly communicated, "Say nothing and move away slowly." Blake, however, seemed rooted to the spot, his face cycling through expressions, shock, horror, panic, and existential dread. Matt accepted David's handshake with a genuine smile. "Thank you. I was just explaining to your colleague here that I'm looking into acquiring several vehicles for a charity auction benefiting Boston Children's Hospital." David's face lit up with professional enthusiasm, though the slight twitch in his left eye betrayed his awareness of the PR catastrophe potentially brewing. "We would be absolutely thrilled to discuss such an opportunity. Why don't we continue this conversation in my office?" The gathered customers were now openly staring and taking photos. A teenage girl had begun live streaming, narrating in excited whispers. "Oh my God, you guys, I'm at the Porsche dealership and Matt Damon is here and some salesman just totally dissed him for his watch." Matt glanced around, noting the growing spectacle with a slight frown. Throughout his career, he had always tried to maintain as normal a life as possible. Being the center of attention in this unplanned way was exactly what he typically avoided. "Actually," Matt said, his voice lowered, "I think I'll come back another time. When things are calmer." He glanced meaningfully at the growing crowd. David's professional smile faltered. "Mr. Damon, please. I assure you that what just occurred does not reflect our dealership's values or standard of customer service." "It's really not necessary," Matt interrupted gently. "This isn't about being offended. I understand how it happened." He turned slightly toward Blake, who still stood frozen like a deer in headlights. "For what it's worth," Matt said directly to Blake, "I don't think this has to be as big a deal as it's becoming. We all make assumptions sometimes." Blake finally found his voice, though it emerged as a strained whisper. "Mr. Damon, I can't begin to express how—" Matt raised a hand, stopping the apology. "Here's the thing that I've learned after being in the public eye for most of my adult life. What matters isn't the mistake. We all make those. What matters is what you do next." Something in Matt's tone, the lack of condemnation, the absence of righteous anger, seemed to penetrate Blake's panic. His breathing slowed, and he managed to meet Matt's gaze directly. "I judged you by your watch," Blake said, the admission clearly painful but necessary. "And I was completely wrong." Matt nodded, acknowledging the statement. "The question is, what will you do with that realization?" Before Blake could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A local news van had pulled up outside. David cursed under his breath. Someone must have called the media. Matt sighed. This was exactly the sort of circus he tried to avoid. "Is there a back exit?" Matt asked quietly. As David began leading Matt toward the office and the promised escape route, Matt paused and added one more thing, words that would echo in Blake's mind for months. "By the way, I've worn this same watch to the Oscars, to the White House, and to every major negotiation of my career. Not because I can't afford better, but because it reminds me of what matters. Maybe the real luxury isn't what's on your wrist, but having the freedom to choose what goes there." With that, Matt followed David toward the back exit, leaving Blake standing alone in the showroom, surrounded by whispering customers and the incriminating glow of smartphone cameras, documenting his most humiliating professional moment. By 5:30 that afternoon, the video had reached 1 million views on TikTok. By 8:00 p.m., it had been shared across every major social media platform, By midnight, it had become the top trending topic with the hashtag #TimexDamon. Blake sat alone in his apartment, a glass of bourbon untouched before him, watching the social media disaster unfold in real time. This is why I hate salespeople. The arrogance is unreal. Imagine thinking you're better than Matt Damon because of your watch. That salesman probably got fired before Matt Damon even left the building. Blake hadn't been fired, not yet. David had placed him on administrative leave pending a review. Corporate headquarters was assessing the situation. 15 years of exceptional sales records. 5 consecutive Salesperson of the Year awards, all potentially erased by a 10-second clip that showed him at his absolute worst. He glanced at his Rolex. $14,000 to broadcast to the world that he was the kind of person who judged others by their accessories. His phone buzzed with an incoming call, his sister Karen, the 5th time she'd tried to reach him. This time he answered. Before you ask, yes, I've seen it. Yes, it's as bad as it looks. And yes, I probably deserve everything that's happening, he said. Karen's voice was surprisingly gentle. I wasn't calling to judge you, Blake. I was calling to see if you're okay. The unexpected compassion cracked something in Blake's carefully constructed facade. I'm not okay, he admitted quietly. I destroyed my career today by being exactly the kind of person I always promised myself I wouldn't become. There was a moment of silence before Karen spoke again. Do you remember when you first started selling cars? That little Honda dealership in Pasadena? Blake closed his eyes. Of course I do. You were different then, Karen continued. You used to tell me stories about helping young couples find their first reliable car, or finding the perfect vehicle for a single mom on a tight budget. You cared about matching people with what they needed, not just making the biggest commission. Blake swallowed hard. She was right. Somewhere along the way, between the luxury brands, the escalating commissions, and the intoxicating feeling of being surrounded by wealth, he had lost something essential. When did I become this person, Karen? He asked, the question directed as much at himself as at his sister. After ending the call, Blake found himself staring at his laptop screen. Almost without conscious decision, he opened the browser and typed Matt Damon charity work. For the next 2 hours, he read article after article about the Waterdorg Foundation that Matt had co-founded, which had helped provide clean water to over 43 million people worldwide. He read about the actor's quiet but substantial support of numerous children's hospitals, including the very Boston Children's Hospital he had mentioned in the showroom. All while wearing, Blake now realized, that same Timex watch. Meanwhile, across town, in his modest, by Hollywood standards, Pacific Palisades home, Matt Damon was having a very different evening. I never wanted this to become a thing. Matt sighed, putting down his phone. I just wanted to talk about getting some cars for the hospital auction. His wife, Luciana, glanced up from preparing dinner. You're worried about that salesman, aren't you? Matt nodded. He made a mistake. A pretty human one, honestly, but now his life is being torn apart online by people who don't know anything about him except for 10 seconds of bad judgment. Luciana studied him for a moment. So what are you going to do about it? What can I do? Matt asked. The internet has already decided he's the villain in this story. Since when do you let other people write your story? Luciana challenged gently. You're Matt Damon. If you want to change the narrative, you can. Matt looked down at the Timex on his wrist. His father's words echoed in his mind. Remember who you are. He knew what he needed to do. By morning, the incident had evolved from viral sensation to full-blown cultural moment. Late-night comedians had incorporated it into their monologues. Morning shows were running segments on the psychology of status symbols. Blake Thompson arrived at the dealership 30 minutes before his scheduled meeting with management, almost certainly to be fired. As he waited in conference room A, David entered alone, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Morning, Blake, David said, sliding one across the table. Blake unconsciously touched his bare wrist. He had deliberately left his Rolex at home today. I need to show you something, David said, pulling out his tablet. It showed a social media post. But not the damning video Blake had expected. Instead, it was a new video, posted just hours earlier on Matt Damon's official account. In the video, Matt was seated in what appeared to be his home office, looking directly into the camera. "Hey everyone," the video began. "By now, many of you have seen a clip from yesterday at a Porsche dealership in Los Angeles. I wanted to address what happened, because I think the online reaction has gotten out of hand." Blake felt his pulse quicken as Matt continued. "Yes, there was an awkward moment with a salesperson who made an assumption based on my watch and clothing. But here's the thing. We all make judgments based on appearances sometimes. I've done it. You've probably done it. It's a very human mistake." Matt held up his wrist, showing the Timex. "This watch means a lot to me because my father gave it to me. But I don't wear it to make a statement or to trick people. I wear it because it reminds me of where I came from and what matters to me." The salesperson couldn't have known that. Matt leaned closer to the camera, his expression serious. "What bothers me most about how this is played out is that it's distracting from what I was actually there to discuss. A charity auction for Boston Children's Hospital. So if you've shared or commented on that video, I'd ask you to channel that same energy into something that actually matters. I've put a link below where you can learn more about the hospital's work." He paused, then added, "And to the salesperson involved, if you're watching this, I meant what I said yesterday. It's not the mistake that defines you. I hope we get the chance to meet again under better circumstances." The video ended, and David turned the tablet back toward himself. "He posted that across all his platforms early this morning," David explained. "It's already getting more views than the original video." Blake sat in stunned silence. After everything that had happened, Matt Damon had thrown him a lifeline. "Why would he do that?" Blake finally asked, barely above a whisper. David shrugged. "Maybe because he's exactly the kind of person who wears a $50 watch with a $200 million net worth. Authentic." "So, what happens now?" Blake asked, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. David leaned forward. "That depends on you, Blake. Corporate was ready to let you go yesterday. Make no mistake about that. But after this video, they're reconsidering." "What kind of opportunity?" Blake asked cautiously. "Option 1, you take a severance package and we part ways amicably. Option 2 is more complicated. You stay with the company, but in a different capacity. For the next 6 months, you work with our corporate foundation on the charitable partnership that Matt Damon originally came in to discuss. You help organize the vehicle donations for the Boston Children's Hospital auction, and you become the face of a new company initiative focused on community engagement." Blake stared at David. "You want me? The guy who just humiliated the company by insulting Matt Damon? To be the face of a charitable initiative?" "Sometimes the most powerful stories of change come from unlikely places," David replied. "I should mention that Matt Damon's team reached out this morning. If you choose option 2, he's willing to meet with you, privately, no cameras, to discuss the charity auction." Blake's eyes widened in disbelief. "He asked for me? Why?" David shrugged. "You'd have to ask him that yourself. But if I had to guess, I'd say he saw something in you that he thought was worth a second chance." The drive home from the dealership felt surreal to Blake. Everything seemed different somehow, as if the city itself had transformed overnight. In reality, of course, the only thing that had changed was Blake's perspective. When he reached his apartment building, Blake nodded to the doorman, a man he had passed hundreds of times but whose name he had never bothered to learn. "Afternoon, Mr. Thompson," the doorman greeted him with a friendly smile. "Early day today? Something like that, Blake hesitated, embarrassed. "Eduardo," the man supplied without judgment. "I've been working here 3 years now." 3 years! Blake had lived in the building for 5. "Right, Eduardo. Sorry about that." Inside his apartment, Blake went straight to his bedroom closet and opened his safe, removing the Rolex he had left behind this morning. $14,000. More than Eduardo probably made in 6 months. Blake placed the Rolex on his dresser and pulled out his phone. He typed, "Boston Children's Hospital donation." The hospital's website appeared, with a prominent Donate Now button. Without overthinking, Blake entered his credit card information and a donation amount, $14,000, 0 cents. Exactly the cost of the watch. As he confirmed the transaction, Blake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Not completely, but enough to notice the difference. His phone buzzed with a text from Karen. Saw Matt Damon's video, call me when you can. After updating his sister, she asked the crucial question, and which option are you going to choose? I don't know yet, Blake admitted. The severance package is tempting. I could take some time off, maybe try something completely different, but, Karen prompted, knowing her brother well. But then I'd be running away, Blake said slowly, taking the easy way out instead of facing the consequences of my actions. Do you remember what you wanted to be when you were a kid? Karen asked unexpectedly. Blake smiled at the memory. A firefighter, until I was about 12 and realized I was terrified of heights. And after that? I wanted to build things, be an architect or an engineer. The admission felt strange, like discussing someone else's life. What happened to that dream? Karen asked gently. Blake shrugged. Life, I guess. I needed money for college, started selling cars part-time, discovered I was good at it. One thing led to another, and here we are. Here we are, Karen echoed. At a crossroads, after ending the call, Blake composed a brief email to David. I'm in for option 2. When can I meet with Matt Damon's team? He hit send before he could second-guess himself. For the first time and longer than he could remember, Blake felt something that had been missing from his carefully constructed life. Hope. Not hope for greater success or more impressive acquisitions, but hope for becoming someone he could genuinely respect when he looked in the mirror each morning. The Water Org offices in Los Angeles were nothing like Blake had imagined. Having spent his career in gleaming showrooms of luxury car brands, he had developed certain expectations about how success manifested itself physically. But the converted warehouse space in Culver City defied those expectations entirely. The building was practical rather than ostentatious, with an open floor plan, abundant natural light, and walls adorned with powerful photography showing the organization's clean water initiatives around the world. When Blake reached the conference room, he paused in the doorway. Seated at the table were just 2 people, a woman he didn't recognize, and Matt Damon himself. Matt looked up and stood with a welcoming smile. Blake, thanks for coming. Please, come in. Mr. Damon, Blake began, but Matt cut him off with a friendly wave. Please, just Matt. And this is Jennifer Morris, Waterdeep's partnership director and the organizational genius behind our collaboration with Boston Children's Hospital. Before we get started, Blake said, feeling it was important to address the elephant in the room. I want to thank you, Matt, for the video you posted. You had every right to let the original clip stand on its own. Matt studied him thoughtfully. I've been on the receiving end of viral moments that didn't show the full picture. The internet has a way of reducing complex human interactions to simplified narratives of heroes and villains. Reality is usually messier than that. Still, Blake insisted, what I said was inexcusable. I judged you based on superficial criteria, and I was completely wrong. You were, Matt agreed simply. But here's the thing, Blake. I didn't post that video for you. I posted it because I saw an opportunity to redirect attention to something that actually matters. He gestured toward the photographs visible through the conference room's glass wall. 40 million people gained access to clean water last year through initiatives like ours. That's 40 million lives tangibly improved. But most people don't read those headlines. They read about celebrity encounters gone wrong. Jennifer nodded. Our biggest challenge isn't developing effective clean water solutions. It's getting people to care enough to support them. Blake was beginning to understand. So my mistake became an opportunity. Exactly, Matt confirmed. After your video went viral, donations to Boston Children's Hospital increased by over 300% in 24 hours. So where do I fit into all this now? Blake asked. Jennifer slid a folder across the table. This is the initial concept for the Driving Hope Initiative. It's a partnership between Porsche, WaterJag, and Boston Children's Hospital. We need someone who understands the luxury automotive market from the inside, Matt explained. Someone who can speak that language and connect with potential donors and partners. Blake looked up from the documents, confused. But why me specifically? After what happened, I'm hardly the ideal ambassador. Matt smiled. Actually, you might be exactly the right person. Your story, if you're willing to own it, becomes part of the narrative. It's about transformation, about looking beyond the surface to what really matters. We're not looking for a polished corporate spokesperson, Jennifer added. We're looking for authenticity. Blake sat back, processing what they were suggesting. You want me to use my public humiliation as, what, a redemption story? We want you to use your experience as a bridge, Matt corrected. You've spent years understanding what motivates people who buy luxury items. Now you have the opportunity to redirect some of that motivation toward causes that transform lives. Jennifer leaned forward. Blake, when we first heard about the incident, we assumed you were just another arrogant salesperson. But then we did some research on you. Research? Jennifer nodded. We found reviews from your customers over the years. The consistent theme was that you were exceptionally good at matching people with exactly the right vehicle for their needs, not just pushing the most expensive model. Blake hadn't expected this. Hearing it described this way made him realize there had always been something more to it, a genuine satisfaction in finding the right match between person and product. I just did my job, he said quietly. You did it well, Matt replied. And that's why we think you could be valuable to this initiative. I'm not sure I'm the person you think I am, Blake admitted finally, but I'd like to try to be. Matt smiled. That's all any of us can do, right? Try to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. 6 months later, Blake stood at the edge of the stage, watching as the auctioneer's gavel came down with a decisive crack. Sold for $375,000. Applause erupted throughout the ballroom as the sapphire blue Porsche 911 Turbo S, the very same model Matt Damon had been examining on that fateful day, was officially purchased for the benefit of Boston Children's Hospital. On a screen behind the stage, a real-time counter updated. $4,700,000, 0 cents raised so far, with 3 more vehicles still to auction. Blake felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to find David beaming with pride. We're going to blow past our $5 million goal, David said, having to raise his voice slightly over the applause. This is beyond what anyone expected. The journey to this point had not been easy. Some colleagues had been openly skeptical of his conversion, viewing it as a calculated move to save his job. The media had initially framed the story as a PR stunt. But Blake had surprised everyone, including himself, with his commitment. He had thrown himself into learning everything he could about Boston Children's Hospital and Water Egg, visiting the hospital multiple times to meet with young patients and their families. Most significantly, he had embraced using his own story as a bridge. In his first public speaking engagement, Blake had stood before a group of Porsche owners and said simply, 3 months ago, I judged someone based on the watch they were wearing. I was completely wrong, and that moment was captured for the world to see. It was humiliating, but it was also the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to confront the person I had become. That honest acknowledgement had resonated more powerfully than any polished corporate speech could have, and somewhere along the way, what had started as a job, a means of salvaging his career, had evolved into a genuine calling. Blake had discovered that the same skills that had made him an exceptional salesperson were invaluable in the nonprofit world. After the auction concluded, with a total of $5,800,000, 0 cents raised, Blake found himself standing with Matt near the 911 Turbo S that had been at the center of the original viral moment. Quite a journey from that day in the showroom, Matt commented, sipping champagne. Blake nodded. I never could have predicted any of this. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed. I can, Matt replied simply. I saw it that first day. You know, there was something in the way you responded. Not defensive, not angry, just open to the lesson. Blake considered this. I had a lot of help along the way. I moved, you know, Blake said suddenly. Sold the downtown high-rise condo, bought a small house in Culver City. It's nothing fancy, but it has a yard and I can walk to work at the foundation offices. Big change. Blake laughed softly. One of many. Sold the Rolex, too. Donated the money to the hospital. Turns out I don't miss it at all. Matt glanced at Blake's wrist, where he now wore a simple digital watch. Nice timepiece. Water resident to 50 meters and has a stopwatch function, perfect for what I need. Blake shook his head, still amazed at how completely his perspective had shifted. A year ago, I would have been embarrassed to wear this where anyone could see it. And now? Now I understand what you meant that day. The watch doesn't make the person. It never did. 1 year to the day after the viral video that changed his life, Blake Thompson stood in the Wilshire Boulevard Porsche showroom, watching as a group of children pressed their faces against the windows of a bright yellow 911 Carrera. The showroom had been transformed for the day, the usual hushed atmosphere replaced by the excited chatter of young cancer patients and their families invited for a special event. Some children were in wheelchairs, others wore protective masks, but all shared the wonder of seeing up close the exotic vehicles they had previously only encountered in video games. "Can I sit in it, please?" asked a thin boy of about 9, his baseball cap covering what Blake knew was a head bare from chemotherapy. "That's exactly why it's here, buddy," Blake replied, opening the door with a flourish. "Hop in and see how it feels to be a race car driver this event." Dream Driver's Day had been Blake's idea. After the success of the charity auction, he had proposed opening the dealership to young patients from Boston Children's Hospital's Los Angeles partner facilities, giving them a day of escape and joy. From across the showroom, Blake caught sight of Matt Damon entering through the main doors, accompanied by Jennifer from Water Dock, and Dr. Alan Friedman, the neuroblastoma specialist whose research was being funded by their initiative. "This is incredible, Blake, truly," Matt said, taking in the transformed showroom. Dr. Friedman surveyed the scene with evident emotion. We focus so much on the medical side, the treatments, the research, the protocols. But days like this, they are part of the healing process too, giving these kids a chance to just be kids again, even for a few hours. After the event concluded, Blake found himself alone in the showroom that had once been the center of his professional universe. The space looked different to him now, not just because of the day's decorations, but because his entire perspective had shifted. The cars were still beautiful, still engineering masterpieces worthy of admiration. But they were no longer the point. They were vehicles in the truest sense, not just for transportation, but for transformation, for connection, for impact. Blake walked to the front doors and looked out at the Los Angeles sunset. He checked his simple watch, a habit that now carried none of its former significance. He had a meeting tomorrow morning with Dr. Friedman to discuss expanding the research grant, and then lunch with Jennifer to plan the next phase of their water access initiative. His life was fuller now than it had ever been when it was focused on status and sales. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had found true fulfillment only after losing the very things he had once thought defined his success. As Blake turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the showroom window. The man looking back at him wasn't defined by his watch, his clothes, or his surroundings. He was defined by something far more valuable, the impact he chose to make and the connections he chose to nurture. It had taken a viral moment of humiliation to show him what really mattered. But as Blake had learned over the past year, sometimes the most powerful transformations begin in the most unexpected ways, and sometimes the true measure of a person has nothing to do with what they wear on their wrist.